I cannot believe what I just watched last week when the Bills hosted the Indianapolis Colts. Except I could believe it because it is something that I saw not quite this season, but something I saw last season, and something that's stuck in my mind, still stays in my mind, and something that I thought was simply an aberration. And that was the Bills getting absolutely murdered by a solid AFC South opponent. And, if you look at the scores of the two games, funny enough, 42-16, 41-15. The scores are very similar. Was this a scoregami? I think it was. I think this was a scoregami game. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, the Bills got their asses kicked last year by the Titans, and that game has lived in my memory forever. And this year, the Bills get their ass kicked week 11 to the Indianapolis Colts, 41-15. And the thing with last year's loss to Tennessee was that it seemed like a bit of a fluke, and it turned out to be a bit of a fluke. However, this season for the Bills, we're a little bit later in the season. Last year it was week 6. This year it's week 11. We've already had our bye week, and we are in the thick of not only just the AFC race for the top seed or whatever, but the divisional race, right? Last year, the division was more or less kind of free. I mean, I know the Dolphins won 10 games, but I mean, come on. But this year, man, crazy. And, after the Bills lost to the Jags, that was a fluke, right? Right? At least the defense played really well against the Jags in that game. And, you thought it was a fluke because the Bills then traveled to New York last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever. It's Wednesday night, so a week and a half ago, to play the Jets, who had just upset the Bengals the week before with Mike White and had Mike White playing pretty goddamn well the week before he got hurt against the Colts. Just beat the shit out of us, obviously. And they had their probably most complete game of the season, I would say, because Josh Allen was fantastic and the defense was fantastic and pretty much everything worked. If I remember correctly, the special teams was great. Mike White threw 4 interceptions. Josh Allen threw for like almost 400 yards. Stephon Diggs had like 160 yards. Like, it was just the most complete game I think the Bills had all year, right? Because there's like that game that sticks out, and then there's the Washington game, I think, and also maybe Kansas City. Those are the three of the best games the Bills have played, and since outside of those 3, I know there's the Miami home shutout that they had, but Allen was kind of sussy in that game. Keep it a buck, but that was dominant. I mean, they looked like the 13-4 team, 14-3, top seed, Super Bowl pick, AFC champion team that a lot of people, including myself, was anticipating. But then they go out and they play Indianapolis, who I thought was a pretty good team. Last year I picked them, or before the year I had pegged them and the Titans to be like 2 of the most not underrated, but just like incredibly well-rounded teams in the league, especially because I was expecting Carson Wentz to be pretty goddamn good under Frank Reich, and I think he has been pretty good under Frank Reich. I didn't think that Jonathan Taylor was going to be as good as he has been this year, but I mean, if you really look at the Titans and the Colts, not only do they both play in the same division and conference or whatever, but I mean, they both have solid quarterbacks with fantastic running games and really smart coaches. I will say the Colts, I think, have the better defense, but I feel like the Titans have like the better pedigree, if that makes sense. And I mean, the Colts, they had probably the worst like first 5 games of the season that you could like ever ask for, because they had to play the Rams, they had to play the Seahawks, they had to play, I want to say, the Cardinals and the Ravens, and I think they had like the Texans and the Titans. So I mean, that shit was ridiculous, right? Like their opening schedule was brutal. And no, they haven't played the Cardinals yet, but they had Seattle, Rams, Titans, Miami, Baltimore. Like their first 5 games, if they would have won 2 of those 3 games, I mean, you would have had to have been happy. And they only won 1 of those games, and ultimately here they are sitting at 6-5 or 6-4. No, they're 6-5. So I mean, things are looking good for the Colts, or things are looking decent for the Colts. They did get swept by the Titans, so them winning the division unfortunately isn't really in their control. But they're not a bad team, and they point blank were. I wasn't necessarily intimidated by the Colts per se, because I don't see them as like one of those kind of top tier level teams like the Kansas Cities or the Tampa Bays or the LA Rams or the Green Bay Packers or anything like that. And I don't think that, I feel like they're kind of a tier, not even just a tier below that, because like I feel like the tier below that is like the Tennessees, the Pittsburghs, the Cincinnatis, the New Orleans. I feel like they're, not to shit on them because they just destroyed the Bills, who I think are in that second tier. Or no, I think the Bills are probably maybe in the first tier. But I don't know. I feel like they're kind of lumped in with, the Chargers and the Browns and the Saints and, maybe the Raiders. Like they're a solid team that on paper looks pretty good and can do some damage. But man, to think that they did what they did against the Bills, crazy. At home as well, in pretty terrible conditions, which I guess you could kind of understand if you really look at the game a little closer. The Colts are a dome team, so that was, something that whenever I thought about the shitty weather, that kind of came to mind first whenever I noticed it was kind of cold and rainy. But then I was like, oh wait, who's in the backfield? But the Bills' defense is so good this year, right? Like, I knew for a fact Carson Wentz wasn't going to beat the Bills with his arm, because no quarterback has beat the Bills with his arm this year, right? Ben Roethlisberger sure as hell didn't. Patrick Mahomes didn't even come close, Ryan Tannehill, no, he didn't fucking win the game. It was Derrick Henry, And Trevor Lawrence, please. The Bills lost that game more than the Jags won it, straight up. I'm going to be completely fucking honest. And so Carson Wentz didn't win this game. I was trying to think of the positives that came out from this game, like the things the Bills did well. And I guess, Carson Wentz going 11 of 20 for 105 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I guess that's your big dub, is that the Bills statistically have to be one of like the best passing defenses of all time, because their touchdown interception ratio is like 6-17. Like that's, and I know they played some dog quarterbacks this year, straight up. I mean, outside of Mahomes, I mean, they have not played another top tier quarterback all season long, and they played a lot of like mid-range guys like Tannehill and Wentz, and even then they haven't played that many. But still, I mean, the Bills' passing offense has been ridiculous. But what does it matter if you only give up 100 yards passing? You gave up 100 yards passing for a reason, because Jonathan Taylor went for 185 yards in 4 touchdowns on the ground to go with 1 through the air. Like, the Colts ran for 260 yards. 4 touchdowns. Yeah, you only allowed 100 yards passing. You only allowed 370 yards of total offense, which is not a ton per se. But I mean, what was the biggest deficit? Was it 31-7 at one point? I think it was 31. I want to say 31-7, or 38-7 at one point. That was the biggest deficit of the game. And I mean, Jonathan Taylor was the one who was moving the ball down the field. And I mean, when it's 31-7 in the third quarter, I mean, Carson Wentz isn't going to be throwing it all over the place, especially with the weather the way it was. And so I mean, I don't know. I feel like that being a positive is still not really something that you can legitimately like praise, because I mean, why the fuck would you throw it? But man, shout out the Colts. They showed up. A huge game for them. Seriously, because while the Titans fall once again to a severely inferior opponent, they still are 2.5 games up, I believe, on the Colts, because they are sitting at actually no, they're only 2 games up. They're 8-3 to 6-5. Now that I think about it, so that was a huge win for the Colts. But unfortunately, once again, I mean, the Colts' divisional hopes are pretty much, I don't want to say they're done, but it's going to be hard, especially since they got swept by the Titans. But anyway, moving on. I want to actually talk about the game. So breaking it down, the 3 phases of the game, just like in the Titans game, the Bills got dominated, the Titans game from last year, got dominated on the offensive side of the ball, because the Titans just went up and down the field and were like 6 for 6 in the red zone or something like that. And the Bills turned the ball over and just, blah, blah, blah. The defense got thrashed, obviously, because they went 6 for 6. In the special teams, if I remember correctly, there was not only a missed kick or extra point, but there was also a fumble on the kick return. Remember that. Okay, so this week, past week, against the Colts, the Bills, 3 turnovers, one of them on a special teams kick return. Two interceptions from Josh Allen. And 260 yards allowed on the ground to Jonathan Taylor. So your special teams failed you. 2 missed kicks as well. Forgot about that. 2 missed field goals. One kind of short and one kind of long. So, it is what it is. Bass was bound to miss, right? And then you also had the fumble by McKenzie. So that's bad on the special teams. Obviously, the yardage and the no turnovers forced by the defense is bad, right? Bad. And then the offense, Josh Allen, only 200 yards passing, 2 interceptions, only, 90 rushing yards, only 300 yards of offense. It's just bad. I mean, straight up, the Bills got dominated in every facet of the game. It was complete and total domination. And that is what sticks out with this loss in comparison to the other 3 that we've had this year, right? Because in the Steelers game, the offense sucked and the special teams kind of sucked because there was the block punt. But the defense still played really well, right? I mean, the defense still only allowed, 16 points, which in the NFL, you'll take that, right? I mean, and Najee Harris, granted it was his first game, he wasn't really anywhere to be found, was he? And I mean, he hasn't proved to be great, but I mean, still, he's, at this point, one of the better running backs in the league, whether it's by virtue of them just feeding him the ball over and over and over again, kind of getting a little bit of the David Montgomery treatment. I don't know, but still, they didn't get completely dominated in that game in the loss, and there were still some positives, right? Jags game. Special teams were our only points, and the defense didn't even allow a touchdown, right? It was just 3 field goals. The offense was pitiful, and that game was awful. But still, the defense played really well, and if you don't allow a touchdown, and I get it, Trevor Lawrence is a rookie quarterback, But still, if you don't allow a touchdown on defense, that is a good performance. Straight up. Right? And then the Titans game. Like I said, I don't remember much from the special teams, I'll be honest, in that game. However, the Bills' offense was pretty great. Josh Allen, what do you have? Like 350 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he played well in that game. I thought the offense played well in that game. The defense is what really let you down. So, in all the losses, except for the Colts game, there was at least some sort of bright spot, and I just cannot find one in this loss that they just had last week. I'm trying, I'm looking, I'm breaking things down, and the only thing that I can come up with is the fact that you only, gave up 100 yards passing, but when you actually think about it, that's not even really a positive, because it's because of your glaring negative being that they were able to run the ball so well. So I mean, like, what the fuck? It's only a positive by virtue of the negative, But at the end of the day, there was one good thing that me and a lot of other people noticed and kind of picked up on, and that was the fact that our boy Matt Breida, a guy who I was pretty excited when they signed in the offseason, because he has an element that Devin Singletary and Zach Moss simply just don't have, and being just breakaway speed. He had himself a nice game. He did. And, he had gotten a little bit of action for the first time this season against the Jets the following week, which was something that I was pretty happy to see. And they decided to give him the ball a little bit more this past week against the Colts. And, I mean, he only touched it 5 times, but he got like 51 yards. He had like a long of 30. So, I mean, he provided a spark. And, I mean, the fact that he only touched the ball 5 times and he's the goddamn bright spot, I mean, that's sad. That's sad, But, I mean, he did have, almost 70 all-purpose yards. So, outside of Dawson Knox, he was the biggest contributor on the offensive side of the ball. So, that's the only positive that that I could take out. Zach Moss was awful. Devin Singletary didn't get much touch. I mean, they didn't run the ball very much. And I know that's something that a lot of people kind of go back and forth on, whether or not it's a bigger issue than it may or may not be. They passed the ball really, really well. They're one of the best passing offenses in the league. And, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there are times where you need to run the ball. I do get that. However, just because you don't, just because you pass the ball a significant amount of times more than you run the ball doesn't necessarily always mean it's a bad thing. However, I mean, they only ran the ball 13 times this game. 2 of those were Josh Allen runs, so probably like 11 designed runs, right? Not ideal, especially in these weather circumstances, but I mean, you're talking about this game being, 24-7 at half. So, I mean, there wasn't a lot of running that you're going to do being down by that much, especially trying to score quickly with how well the Colts were moving the ball down the field. So, but I guess a greater positive and something that I'm looking forward to seeing and I'm really interested to see how it plays out is Zach Moss's kind of slow fall into the doghouse, if you will. And Matt Breida's uprise and how that will look. Because Devin Singletary, he is what he is. I mean, he is averaged like almost 5 yards a carry over into his 3rd season in the league. Like, he is not the bell cow, but he's a good-ass player. Zach Moss, on the other hand, he's the guy who I'm not really a big fan of. Never really been a big fan of Zach Moss because I just don't think he's very special. I don't think he has any particularly great traits. He's not very fast. He's not very quick. He's got more power than Devin Singletary, but that's not saying much. And he's he just kind of exists. He's just kind of a running back who's just okay. And so, I mean, Devin Singletary, in my opinion, can break. He breaks so many goddamn tackles. He's not very fast. I get it, but he makes plays, and Matt Breida is much faster than all of the other running backs the Bills have had on their roster in a fat minute. So I think the combination of Singletary and Breida could be something to behold and could really be something this Bills offense could use. I know like Isaiah McKenzie is kind of like Matt Breida in how he's quick in his quickness and speed, but Breida is more acclimated to the running back position, and he's had success in the past. Fitting in to a role like a Devin Singletary, where he's not the primary back, but he's a guy who gets a decent amount of touches, and you look up and you're like, holy shit, he's 5.2 yards per carry. What? We didn't even realize this. And so I don't know. I think a big positive that could come out of this game is Zach Moss is kind of benched in favor of Matt Breida. And you know what? I'm all for it. I know you might lose a little bit of downhill running or whatever, just because Singletary and Breida don't necessarily bring that, lower your shoulder aspect to the running game. But I mean, that's what Josh Allen's for. And maybe that's not the greatest thing to say, because, the more your quarterback, tries to run the ball, the more he gets hit, the more he gets injured. And then obviously we know with predominantly running quarterbacks, I mean, Cam Newton is a poster child for that types of stuff, and it really deteriorating your body and ending your career shortly, possibly. So I don't really want to get into that, but yeah, this Colts game was really bad. Shout out the Colts though; they really, really needed this game. The Bills, of course, needed this game, but the Bills are very, very, very much alive in their divisional hunt. The Colts, had they lost this game, even though the Jags did still beat the Titans, I think the Colts probably would have been kaput. And so I like the Colts. I like Frank Reich. I kind of like Carson Wentz. I think they have a really, really well-rounded team. Jonathan Taylor, a Big Ten guy, not a big Wisconsin fan, but nonetheless, I can support it. I'm okay with the Colts getting their revenge for the Bills' win that they got against them in the wild card round this year. It is what it is. It's done. It's over with. And I think there's no way the Bills can play worse than this. Absolutely no way. So you hate for them to have a game like this late in the season. You'd rather this happen in week 5 instead of week fucking 11. But you know what? It is what it is. You can only go up from here, right? And I felt like I was saying that when they lost to the Jags. But like I said, at least in the Jags games, the defense showed up. The defense was good, because you can't expect a facet of your team, or, facets of your team, plural, to be good every single week. There's no way your defense, like the Bills defense, is going to perform the way it did against the, Jets, or the way it did against the Jags, or the way it did against the Texans. Granted, those were, 3 pretty pitiful offenses, let's be real, but still, it's not going to be that level every single game. It's just not going to happen, right? The same way a player is not going to go off every single game. Jonathan Taylor is not going to rush 32 times for 185 and 4 touchdowns every single game. They're going to have cool down games. They might have games where they play terrible. You never know. Next week, I believe the Colts play the Patriots. Jonathan Taylor could rush 15 times for 40 yards and not get a touchdown, and maybe only get a catch or so for 10 yards. It's going to happen, right? Like, there is no such thing as wire-to-wire dominance in the NFL. And when I say dominance, I mean, like, if you're a quarterback passing 4 touchdowns every game, if you're a running back getting at least 150 yards and 2 touchdowns every game, it's not going to happen, all right? And for the Bills defense, forcing 2 or 3 plus turnovers and allowing less than 20 points every game, like, it's not going to happen, right? However, it's not like the Bills had been spectacular in those facets for 5, 6, 7 games in a row. That being said, the defense has been good all year, aside for 1 game against Derrick Henry. So to see them really get ripped a new one is kind of amazing, frankly. But I don't know. I think although it's later in the season and the Bills have 4 losses at this point, and looking ahead to their schedule, there are a few kind of trickier games that we may have overlooked earlier on in the season, just because at the time they didn't look like they were going to be nearly as threatening. I'm still not phoning in the Bills winning the division / being a threat for the AFC title is not a foregone conclusion, God damn it. All right. I think the Bills are going to turn around and they have themselves a fantastic scenario, a great scenario, honestly, almost perfect, to turn around so quickly after just having the worst game of the season for them, by far, worst performance in front of the home crowd. Oh, God, terrible. But then quickly get to put it out of their memory. They go to New Orleans, a big ruckus atmosphere in front of a lot of fans on prime time. Not quite the busiest game, biggest regular season game of the season, arguably, which I would say is probably the 4 o'clock Thanksgiving game, but it's still the evening game, the night game on Thanksgiving. You're still playing on Thanksgiving against a Saints team that is kind of okay, mediocre. They're probably going to finish like 8-9, but they have a backup quarterback, and they are on their third string running back, and they don't have Michael Thomas. A pretty depleted offense, right? And a team that just got, frankly, demoralized and beat down by the Philadelphia Eagles, who are a pretty mediocre team in their own right. Okay? I think this is going to be a get-right game. I think this could be a game that gets, I don't want to say it gets ugly, but I've got a feeling it's going to be similar to like the 49ers game last year, where like it's kind of a dicey, like low-key, close, anticipated game where like some people had the 49ers winning last year, if you remember, against the Bills, and the Bills, like, basically their offense was amazing, and Nick Mullins and the boys just could not keep up. And I think towards the end it went a little closer. I think they pulled within like 10 points in the final score, but like it was a kind of a, not a bloodbath, but Josh Allen just put on a clinic. I'm expecting that to happen. The Saints do have a really good defense, and they have Sean Payton as their coach, but I mean, man, they've had some dog shit outputs this year, you know. And, you know, at the same token, they have had some really good games. But I mean, this is a team that lost to Philadelphia the way it did, lost to Atlanta, lost to the Giants, got fucking walked by the Panthers. I mean, at the same time, though, they kind of dismantled the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they beat the brakes off of the Packers and dominated the Patriots. So you're kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team, and they are coming off of their third straight loss. So you could make the argument that they're hungry. And I mean, they need this game too. Once again, I feel like they need this game more than the Bills do, frankly. But I mean, the Bills are second in the AFC East right now. They are not leading their division, right? So I don't know. I think the Bills will take care of business this week, frankly. This time tomorrow is currently 11 p.m. on Wednesday the 24th, the night before Thanksgiving. I think I will be kind of sitting back, relaxing at my sister's house as I watch Trevor Siemian try and, you know, check the ball down a lot or throw some shallow crosses to get some garbage time points up as the, you know, Saints attempt to pull within 2 scores with, you know, 5 minutes left in the game as they only have 2 timeouts left. Like I think the Bills will take care of business, and you know, it'll be a nice showing on prime time, and you'll be sitting there at 7-4 along with the Patriots, looking ahead to Monday Night Football, hosting the New England Patriots for first place in the division. I think it's going to be a nice feeling, right? Because you're going to have, you know, almost 2 weeks in between games. I mean, you're going to have like 11 days from Thursday to Monday. So I'm excited. I really am. I'm looking forward to it. You know, personally, things are changing pretty quickly. You know, I thought that the Jags game was an aberration, but you know, I'm more thinking that the Colts game, this has to be an aberration. This has to be a fucking one-off. There's no way it's not. But yeah, I know people are thinking the Patriots are going to win the AFC East, and I can kind of understand that with how they've played this year. But personally, I think the Bills' kryptonite, it seems, has been really good running backs. And the Patriots can certainly run the ball, but they have probably the least intimidating quarterback and just in general passing offense that I can remember. If I'm just being honest, like no shade to Mac Jones and the Patriots. I mean, the motherfuckers are 7-4. They've won 5 games in a row. They were sitting at 2-4 with a rookie ass quarterback, and everybody was just like, "There's no way." But they've fought back and they've won some games against some good fucking teams, right? Like they beat the Chargers. They absolutely destroyed the Panthers. They destroyed the Falcons, destroyed the Browns. Like, they're not any slouches, but at the end of the day, I don't think that they will be able to keep up with the Bills. I think the Bills' passing offense, and I don't know. I think that the Bills have Belichick's number minus Brady. They've always had success against the Patriots without Brady, and I think that's going to continue. And I mean, if the Bills sweep the Patriots, they win the division straight up. Like, if we're just kind of going tunnel vision and we're just talking about just winning the division, because that would put them at, they would obviously have the tiebreaker, and that would put them at 5-0 in the division. Like, let's say hypothetically here, the Bills only win their divisional games remaining, and they lose to the Saints, the Bucks, the Falcons, and the Panthers, which there's just no way. But they take care of business against the Jets and the Patriots twice. They're still probably going to win the AFC East, right? They're still probably going to win the AFC East. Whether it's a tiebreaker or the Patriots kind of collapsing, whatever. Because, I mean, 9-8, that's kind of what I think the Patriots are going to finish, if I'm just being honest. I mean, granted, that's assuming they finish 2-4 in their last 6. It's kind of it's a bit of a collapse, but they started 2-4. I don't know. I think by week 16, after the second Patriots game, the division will all be but wrapped up one way or the other. And I'm like 90% sure that the Bills are going to win the AFC East. I was like 99% sure after like the first 6 games, because the Bills were 4-2, the Patriots were 2-4. Oh, how things can change. I'm just saying. And my 13-4 prediction, I cannot ride with that. I think 11-6 seems to be pretty realistic from here on out. As you have the Saints, the Patriots, Bucks, Panthers, then Patriots again, then Falcons, then Jets. The Bills should be favorites in all but the Tampa Bay game. But with how the Bills have played and how they've dropped games to the Jags and the Steelers, like 2 inferior teams, the odds of them not losing to Carolina, or the odds of them losing to Carolina or Atlanta or New Orleans or the Jets, all 4 teams that are significantly worse than them, maybe not significantly in New Orleans' case, but they're probably going to lose one of those games, and I just cannot see them beating Tom Brady, unfortunately. So anyway, this was a long rant, but I had to talk about it. I wanted to get my opinions out that day, because that was I was very just beside myself. But I don't know. I don't think the Bills need to push the panic button yet. Obviously, everybody is mad whenever your team gets destroyed, especially if they get destroyed at this point in the season. But I think we're gonna get a big win against the Saints. I think it's gonna be encouraging, and I think we're gonna beat the Patriots, and that's gonna be even more encouraging. And so I think that things are gonna be okay. And as long as the Bills can catch fire, at this point in the season, I mean, you look at the Tampa Bay Bucks, they were 6-4 at one point. I think they were even 7-5 last year, and they ended up winning out, made the playoffs at 11-5, and won the fucking Super Bowl. All right, and I think Josh Allen is certainly a good enough quarterback to fucking win a Super Bowl. I mean, straight up. I know there are other things at play. Just because you're a good quarterback doesn't mean you can win a Super Bowl. But I think the defense is certainly good enough to be, a Super Bowl defense. So ultimately, though, it starts tomorrow, and I'm really excited. And if they lose again, I'm definitely gonna have to just rant about it and get my feelings out there, and just listen to it at some point down the line, whether it's a year later or a week later, just to see how right or wrong, or how entertaining my reaction, or just how interesting my thoughts were. Because I remember after the Jacksonville game, and especially after the Titans game, I was like, who cares? The Bills are going to easily win this division. I thought the same thing coming into the season, and look where we're at now. Things change quickly, but you know what? Every single good team in the NFL has been beaten / gotten the brakes beaten off of them by an inferior opponent. You cannot tell me other fucking lies. Maybe the Chiefs are the only team that's exempt from that, but honestly, I don't know. Are the Chargers really better than the Chiefs? Something to think about. But the Ravens got beat by the Dolphins. Cowboys got beat by the Broncos. Titans, Jets, and Texans. Packers, they got fucking beat by the goddamn Saints. Cardinals, they got destroyed by the Panthers. Every team has been beaten. Every good team, every elite team. There's not an elite team that has not been battered at some point in the season. The Bucks lost to the goddamn football team. They lost to Taylor Heineke. Anyway, all right. I'm excited. I can't wait. Bills, bounce back. If you lay an egg tomorrow night, oh my God, I don't even want to imagine. I fucking hope not, dude. Ugh, go Bills, bro. Fuck.